Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Riley Lewis Show. I am your host, Riley Lewis, right? Three, two, one. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Riley Lewis Show. I am your host, Riley Lewis. I'm greatly excited about today's episode because this is an episode that relates to a topic that actually a lot of themes that I talk about normally in my daily politics podcast, which you can find on my YouTube channel, but also to some of my master's work that I'm already starting now in the summer. So, as I mentioned in a previous episode, sorry, I have the book in my hand. As I mentioned in a previous episode, about which you can find on my channel again, I am starting a master's program this fall in peace and justice studies. My bachelor's is in political science, and this is going to be my master's. And we have two summer reading books for this fall semester 2020. And one of them is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, and this is his follow-up to a book he wrote called The Underground Railroad. Now, this is a very, very good book. I'm actually, wow, I'm 155 pages into it, and it's 213 pages. You can see by the mark that I've made a good dent in the book, so I'm almost all the way through it, but we don't have to have it read until September. In any case, I also said that I was going to start doing a video series talking about some of the themes, some of the characters from each chapter, and that's what I'm here to do today. So we are going to start where every book starts, with Chapter 1. So, Chapter 1 in the book of Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead really is, in many ways, about detailing the background of our protagonist, Elwood Curtis, who is one of many of the boys who get sent, many of the Nickel Boys who get sent to this Florida school for boys. I believe if you want to look it up online, it would be called the Florida School for Boys. It was a reform school that operated in Jim Crow era and not even way past the Jim Crow era in Tallahassee, Florida. This was a school that opened in 1900 and closed its doors in 2011 after failing some inspections and after several investigations and lawsuits about abuses and even deaths that took place. Sorry, I don't mean to give away any of the book. You should go read it. Again, this is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. You should pick it up from a local bookseller. This is a very good book. But in any case, so basically, in this chapter, we're starting in the 1960s. So it's Christmas 1962. And I believe it's Elwood's aunt gives him a actual record of Martin Luther King Jr. giving a speech at Zion Hill, at Zion Hill Baptist Church. And he's basically, the long story is, Elwood is not allowed to listen to the music of the time, like the rhythm and blues or Motown, but he is allowed to listen to this record from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is deemed appropriate by his grandmother. And after listening to his this recording, basically in this speech, his world is completely changed, and he finds himself completely engaged in the middle of the world of civil rights at the height of Jim Crow era in the American South as a young African American kid. So there's a lot going on. He's living with his grandmother in Tallahassee, and by the way, like I just said earlier, he gets sent eventually to this school, and he gets sent for a reason that I believe happens in Chapter 2, so I won't necessarily go over it right now, but some of the main themes that really are going on are, one of the most common themes is that Elwood, let's see, is this from Dr. King? Yes. He recalls something that Dr. King had said about, there was this amusement park called Funtown, I believe in southern Georgia, which is near Tallahassee, and this was, I believe, a whites only place, and it was called Funtown, this amusement park in the book. And basically, there are all these advertisements all the time, and Dr. King basically, has this refrain, and this is sort of a refrain in Elwood's life, that just because certain kids are not allowed to go into this amusement park because of their skin color and segregation, they are as good as anybody who is going into Funtown. And I really, really liked that theme because it's an equalizer. And it's about empowering one side, not chipping away at something. And I really like that when you're building someone up and empowering them. And that becomes a really common refrain in this book for Elwood. When it comes to his work ethic, when it comes to his academic pursuits, when it comes to his manner and his behavior. You can really tell that this is a very thoughtful person who is really interested in contributing something good to society, despite the fact that so many people in society, call him racial slurs and see him as inferior. He still has so much good in his heart. And that is the thing that I think that we need to remember in today's times, which is why I'm really happy that this is a 2019 publication. I think a lot of people should read this and realize that in many ways, this book, it's beautiful and brutal, but it's also in many ways, it's beautiful in some way because there's a sense that Elwood, despite the struggle, it just holds on to that refrain that he is still as good as anybody. And he does not let other people rent space in his own head, especially prejudiced, bigoted people. And that's that empowering aspect and that having that sense of agency is something that I really think is important. And it's something that I think that we tend to lose these days. I think that today it's very common in our world for people to think that there are too many problems to solve that are unsolvable and we're helpless, and that's why we need to completely overthrow everything and start from scratch. And that's why we're seeing this very strange anti-intellectual, in some ways anti-scientific, certainly anti-enlightenment movement that looks very similar to a sort of almost like a blend between a Maoist and an Orwellian cultural revolution going on. And I think that this is a great book that is able to discuss and detail some of the really ugly and evil aspects of American history and the behavior of white Americans, especially during the early and mid 20th century, during Jim Crow and Reconstruction, especially in the South. Again, this is taking place in Tallahassee, Florida. That said, another thing I really like about this book is that Colson Whitehead is able to use the characters to represent sort of themes, struggle, perseverance, without necessarily being positional. I don't get a sense that this is a book where narrative is displaced for ideology. I actually think that this is an incredibly good example. This is a great example of a well-written, compelling book that follows Elwood Curtis and many of his friends who actually do represent historical events that did happen at this real reform school in Florida. And they're able to touch on racism and bigotry and power structures and systems of oppression and Jim Crow era American South and bigotry and family and hardship and struggle and imprisonment in the incarceration system, and especially for adolescents, and all of these really, really compelling examples that give you a very good picture, an accurate picture of what life was like for a young African American boy, or really a young boy at this school in particular. This Florida school actually accepted, all boys, but they did keep them segregated. And it's like that's just another little thing where it's really hard to fully understand it when we couldn't have lived it. I obviously I didn't live it, but this book makes me feel like I am living it, or at least when I'm reading it. And so I highly recommend it. So again, chapter 1 starts off with detailing Elwood, who is a very detail-oriented, very thoughtful, studious kid who really isn't into getting into trouble at all. He's, very well behaved, very good manners, and he has a lot of ambition. And his grandmother works at a hotel, and that's basically where Elwood spends his time when he's not in school, waiting for her to get off her shift. And so he reads, books, and eventually he starts befriending some dishwashers at this hotel and starts even working at this hotel, I believe. But some of the really important main themes I think that are introduced are the civil rights movement and this sort of sense of agency and being able to actually have empowerment. Maybe empowerment is a whole thing on its own. Another theme, I think, certainly is the legacy of slavery and reconstruction and how ugly life was, and for many in the South during the Jim Crow era. And also another, to that point, recalling that history so that we don't lose that history. This is something I've been talking about on my show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and stuff, about the statues that we're talking about. The argument I would make for keeping statues of even terrible figures is that if we destroy them, then we're destroying the evidence of the evil. So you're, in a weird way, doing the bidding of the person that you're trying to expose. But if you leave the statue remaining, you can forever point to it and say that is proof of this evil. Okay, so I think that's a good place to end it. Sort of a weird way to end a video, but this is going to be one of many about, again, Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. This is a very powerful book. It's well written. The language is very well written. There are vivid characters, incredible imagery, and it really does it makes you feel like you're living in Tallahassee in 1962. And the way Elwood thinks and reacts with other characters, and the way the other characters develop with each other and internally and externally, is incredibly well detailed, and the evolution of the book is so good. I mean, I've almost read all of it, and it's been just a few days. So I highly recommend this book, and this will be the first video of many videos talking about some of the themes and characters and things that we can learn from this book. Again, thank you so much if you've made it with me this far. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really do. If you'd like to support me and support what I'm doing, you can subscribe. You can hit that big subscribe button down below. I'd really appreciate it. You can also hit this link right here and go to my daily politics podcast playlist for lots of good information about the news to help keep you up to date and keep current without raising your heart rate, hopefully. I try. That said, you can also find me on anchor.fm. You can find me on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Breaker at The Riley Lewis Show. You can donate to my virtual wallet on anchor.fm, or you can, again, subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this video, leave me a comment in the comment section down below and let me know how I'm doing. And you can also find the link in the description of this video and visit my Patreon page, where you can sign up, become a member, and make a donation. Thank you so much, everybody. You've been listening to The Riley Lewis Show, and I will see you here again soon.